Howdy, y'all. It's Cody from the Keepers of Nerdom. How you doing? It is time to talk about Star Trek, and we're going to rank today my personal favorites and review the different shows and movies of Star Trek. We're going to go through this. We've got a tier maker list here, and we're going to go through and have an absolute blast. Our first thing up for grabs here for an option is actually Star Trek the Animated Series. And I've watched them. Okay. I like the original series a lot. I think it's at least a B tier in this. It's continuing the stories of the original series. Today's animation and stuff like that, it's very slow, it's plotting, but it's actually a pretty good show in that it's trying to actually tell a good story. I'll give it that for sure. There's not a whole lot I could say about it other than just that. It is slow, but yet they actually have, I think for most of them, the voices are the actors themselves from the original series, which is pretty neat. Pretty neat. Star Trek Beyond is our next option here, and I think if I'm honest about it, I loved watching it when I first got a hold of it, but it ends up being at most a C tier, and the reason being is it's reimagining Star Trek, and not necessarily when you pause to process what it actually has going on inside of it, does it actually hold up very well as far as concept. Really cool visuals, but the thing is too, the Starship Enterprise is silly looking, but also the fact that he's a cadet and becomes a captain immediately, that doesn't add up. Not a thing. Also, we're going to call our big bad plot device red matter because it's red. Come on, like, be more creative here. But I think was that J.J. Abrams? I think so. That shows J.J. Abrams, who did the 7th and 9th movies of Star Wars. There's a reason why he's regarded as just meh. Yeah. So the next one is Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Wow. We might move this, but I think it actually may very well be up at S tier. And here's why. It was a very intense show. Very different. Very backwater, edge of Federation space, but trying to apply Federation law and concepts and morality to a place that's crazy and not great as far as how it's everything's going politically. And it's like Babylon 5. Does it have a better story? Babylon 5, I think, does overall in a way, but yet Deep Space Nine visually and story-wise really lines up very well. And I appreciate the darkness of it without being not Star Trek, in that it's being dark in the sense that the things that are going on around the Starfleet officers, they're having to deal with those situations. And I love the episode with Sisko where he has to bring the Romulans into the war, and it's his confession of what he did wrong and should have him, court-martialed from all of Starfleet, and yet probably Starfleet would actually cover it up, ironically, because of how desperate they were. Very interesting, and I love that about that show, and it's one of those that every time I go back and watch it, it's just good. It's just good, and it just holds up very, very well. First season, but usually most Star Trek shows struggle, but that's a thing. Star Trek Discovery. All right. S tier. No. I think Star Trek Discovery is an F tier, especially the first season. We'll just put it down where you can't hardly see it because that's what it deserves. You know what? Let's adjust down a little bit so we can see our stuff here. There you go. But it's F tier because it changed the look of Klingons, not because they had just better budget and so they could actually do something like they did from the original series into like original series movies and things in TNG, but they wanted to just do something that looked bizarre and say this is a Klingon, and then they had to go back on it because they had so much fan backlash. Story-wise, you've got somebody that literally was a mutineer that started an entire war. She would not become back as a second or first officer or anything. She should be in a prison cell for the rest of her life, right? These are logic things, and just also how the people interact they're not Starfleet officer stuff. Even in Deep Space Nine, there was still a modicum of here's what a Starfleet officer is and does, not this silly, weird, crazy. Just it was bad, right? Just not good. Um, so yeah, I would say it's F tier, and it's not good storytelling. It's not good. The action looks epic because they put a ton of money into the CGI and the special effects, but is it really worth it whenever the stories don't line up and match up with what's good? They had an awesome concept of the mirror universe and they squandered it too. Personal opinion, I watched the first season and I think I watched part of the second. Yeah, I did watch the second season with the super suit thing. That was also really bad. Really bad. All right, moving on. Star Trek Enterprise. This is, to me, actually one of the top tier shows. I love going back to this one every time. It's Jonathan Archer, to me, is one of my favorite captains just to study because he's flawed, but he's also trying to figure out how do we operate out in space when there is no real rules and stuff, that space just, the Earth barely has guidelines and concepts of what it should be in space. I appreciate that. And I just wish they would have leaned even further. Same with Voyager, because Voyager should have been really intense, and the two-part episode Year of Hell is what Voyager should have been the entire time. 100%, right? This is key. So that's, yeah. Star Trek 5? Oh my goodness, what is that called? It's something Undiscovered Country. That's the one with his brother, and it's really bad with his brother and all that stuff. And oh my goodness, is that Star Trek 5? I think so. It looks right. Yeah, it's D tier. Yeah, I just remember it being super cheesy and silly, and there's very little that you want to go back to and watch there. But the best line in there is, "What does God need with a starship?" And I really appreciate that, actually, because it's like, if you're actually God, would you need a starship? The answer is, well, obviously no. That's stupid. Yeah. Anyway, Star Trek First Contact. I'm gonna put it up here for action and excitement, but yet I might have to move it because the thing is, this changes the Borg forever, and I don't know if it's for the better or not. You know what I'm saying? Because now we don't have a faceless enemy. We have a Borg queen that's over them, which is kind of interesting, and I love it. I also love that Picard is dealing with all these feelings. We actually get to see him more emotive than we've seen a lot of times in TNG. Because he should be messed up, and some people have put out there that they're upset that he would be this upset and this messed up. He should be over this and past it with the Borg. And it's like, no, this is all coming back whenever he's face to face with them. Like, it makes sense that Earth was like, no, you should stay away because of how jacked up you were from the last time, and you got assimilated, and we barely got you back. You shouldn't be here. I appreciate that. So anyway, yeah, really, really good stuff. Star Trek Generations. C tier. It's still TNG. It's still a decent concept of story. I like that concept. We get to see the Enterprise B. We get to see Kirk meet Picard. But unfortunately, the joke is, ha ha ha, Kirk dies underneath a bridge instead of on the bridge. Ha ha. But I just appreciate that Picard and Kirk got to meet one another, and it was good. You know what? I don't know. We'll leave it at B for now. I appreciate the film. I really do. But it's got some problems. But it's also a personal thing. Is I actually enjoy the movie just because then the Enterprise D gets destroyed, so we don't have to see it for the other movies because they want to just update it and have a better looking ship in the Sovereign class. And I agree, because the Enterprise D, it's funny, people are so gung-ho about the Enterprise D, and really the Enterprise D it's a big, just a chunky ship that does not look like it's intimidating. It's just big for the excuse of being big. And when you actually study schematics of the ship, there's a ton of empty space when there's only 1,032 crew on board. Like, it's got so much just dead space in it. Like, there's just nothing there. It's just storage and for big missions to carry civilians from planets that are having major catastrophes. And so I get that use, but it's also everything that if you pay attention in the background lore, the Galaxy class is silly expensive to produce, and it's just not a very efficient ship. And then in the Dominion War, one of them gets absolutely, is that the Odyssey? I think so. Absolutely wrecked, and I'm like, good, because these should be put in mothballs forever because they're terrible. The Ambassador class is a better ship by far from everything we've seen. Just saying. Because Galaxy classes blow up, especially the first season. There's one or two at least that blow up, and there's not very many of them. There's like Constitution class level of the Galaxy class, the Enterprise D's ship, and they don't last very long. They're kind of pathetic. So I would say they actually, ironically, have failed design. Sorry. Anyway, next thing, Star Trek Insurrection. I actually am going to put this in A tier. I know a lot of people say it's slow, and it is, but it's a story, a lot of data focused there, and I love the idea of de-aging and really getting into these issues of what would happen if all of a sudden you could live forever. And the sonar interesting. What are they? The Baku? Yeah, that sounds right. It's been a while since I've watched that one, but I really enjoy that film. Actually, I think it's just it's a Star Trek episode that's longer, and I love it, and it's just fun. Picard's trying to be an action hero, which is really funny because he's older, but I think it works better in First Contact. Excuse me. Star Trek Into Darkness, I think, is better than Star Trek Beyond. I think it's a B tier. I think they figured a little bit more out. Actually, no. It's above Star Trek Beyond, but again, the Enterprise is it's derpy looking. The Big Vengeance is awesome. Khan is just, it's so funny. He says it, and he's like, "I'm Khan," and everyone's like, "Who's that?" Because in their world they don't know, and I appreciate that. I really do. I think that's fantastic. Star Trek Lower Decks. I'll just be honest. Some people that are real hardcore Trekkies, and I really am, say it's just member berries, and I can see why. It is. It really truly is. But it's quite. All right. Our next one is. Oh yeah, sorry. We were on Lower Decks. I really love the member berries, right? But it's also, it has some issues in that it's silly and goofy, and would these people even exist inside of Star Trek? And for the people that say no, I would encourage them to go and watch the episode of Star Trek Voyager, and I can't even remember the episode's name, but it is a fantastic episode where Janeway spends time and does an away mission with like 3 of the worst crew members on her group that would have been kicked off the ship had they had a normal starship operation. And I appreciate that. I really do. And it just shows that there would have been a place for these kind of people, that they would have been on a ship like this that's in the background doing background stuff that you would have barely paid attention to because you're like, okay, we don't want to necessarily get rid of them unless they do something real bad, but they aren't going to be on our main ships at all, right? I actually think that's true. And I think that it's a silly thing. It's cheesy and it's on that edge. You could say, yeah, this is way too far. I totally agree. But I think overall it is a lot of fun. I believe this is Star Trek. Oh, this is the motion picture. Oh man. I'm gonna put it B tier. No. The man, I don't know. All right, we'll put it behind those two. The Enterprise looks amazing in its new reformatted version. Fantastic. However, I remember as a kid watching it, and we were so excited because we were at my dad and my friend's dad was in a meeting, so we sat down in the basement of our church to watch Star Trek: The Motion Picture because my friend had brought it, and he said, "Dude, we have 14 minutes of extra footage, and on the box, that's what it said." And I was so excited, only to realize, and I still have these movies on VHS, that the 14 minutes of extra footage is them flying through Voyager's cloud with pretty colors, and them looking at the screen and then pretty colors and looking at the screen and pretty color. I mean, it's bad. It's a bad extra thing. And like, stop. But it does give you the sense of Voyager is massive. Like the cloud even around it is massive. Um, yeah, yeah, just crazy stuff. So, oh man. So yeah, that's where I'd put that one. I think it's a good story, but it's way too long. So it goes right there with the rebooted Star Trek stuff. Star Trek Nemesis goes A tier. We'll put it in front of Lower Decks. I think the battles in this movie are fantastic. I hate that Data dies, but spoilers. But I think overall it's a fantastic film that just wasn't what everybody was expecting. But at the same time, I do find it funny that they kept trying to make the Star Trek crew action heroes, and they just weren't. And so I think that's the one critique, that it doesn't quite rise even to me. No, you know what? I like Nemesis better than Insurrection, just for the space combat, the ramming of the ships. Just the fact that they even did it is just cool. It's not necessarily. I will say there's a critique to be made that the scimitar is way too strong. Like, it doesn't even make sense. How does this thing have the power for shields, cloaking, and firing all at the same time? All right, just silly. Just silly. Just saying. All right. Star Trek: The Next Generation. Obviously, this is S tier, and it's so good because, especially back then, it was more so individualized stories per week with occasional two-parters, things like that, especially for season finales into season intros, season premieres. Great stuff. There's a reason this cast is so well loved today. There's a reason why Wesley Crusher is just thought of as annoying. And it also lends itself to why were some of these characters, why would they show up in other shows? Why would Riker and Worf show up in other shows? I wish Data would have randomly shown up in more stuff, but it's just me. So, Star Trek, the original series is, for me, it goes up here as S tier, right behind Enterprise and DS9. I love it. And there's times where I just want to, I'm going to be painting them on some miniatures, and I'm going to turn Star Trek the original series on. Why? Because it's something, I've seen him enough. I don't have to pay real close attention to know what's going on, but it sets the stage for everything that's to come. And honestly, my favorite thing about the show is often I was a history teacher at a point and used one of the episodes to talk about stuff in our current culture now. And it's because it's fascinating to see 60s and 70s perspective of cultural arguments. And Star Trek was written by science fiction writers, especially the original series and even into TNG and other stuff. But it shines through that they didn't have the budget, but the ideas presented here are so good and so moving and so powerful. And I think that's important to know. Very, very important to know. And I always love the conversations at the end of the episode between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, usually those three. But if I'm honest, one of my favorite characters was always Scotty, because he was kind of a background character. And the reason I actually think he became so much more to me was just sometimes the moments when he would get a little bit more focused, but also into Star Trek Next Generation with Relics, as the episode where they find Scotty on a Dyson Sphere in a transporter. And just the things he tells Geordi, fantastic stuff. And someday we'll try to make a tier maker list of Star Trek casts in each of the Star Trek series, because I think that'd be a lot of fun. But Star Trek Picard, you know what? Yeah, it's straight F tier. We're just gonna put it down there. The reason being, from my understanding, season 3, from everything I've heard, is awesome, but seasons 1 and 2 just mess with so much of the lore that we've had for Star Trek. And I'm sorry, but you cannot take a character and just totally talk down to him for episodes at a time and then expect us to just go along like everything's okay. Season 3 sounds like it really fixed a lot of those things, but that took 2 seasons of things that were breaking all the other canon and story. And it was sad because I watched the first season and I actually stopped and I didn't watch the second season. And then I heard reviews that walked through the episodes. I was like, this messes up the Borg too. which is crazy to think because we talked about First Contact. They changed the Borg drastically there. And then in season 2 of Picard, they mess up the Borg. And it just speaks to what happens when you get bad writers taking a good series. The answer is it gets messed up and destroyed, and it breaks my heart because Star Trek is something near and dear. And season 3 sounds like it fixed quite a few things, but unfortunately, when you've got other issues already inside of it, you got some problems. So, yeah. All right, some of these are a little small, so we're going to look. Oh, Star Trek The Search for Spock. So that would be After Wrath of Khan. Just take me a second. I like this one. I do. So we'll put it up at A tier. It's fun. It's good. Is that the one with Doc Brown as a Klingon? Can't remember the actor's name off the top of my head. It's going to hit me later. I'm totally picturing him and Marty McFly, Michael J. Fox on a stage. Christopher Lloyd. I think that's with him in that one. I think. It's fun, and I love the concept of the resurrection of Spock is not a small thing, and it makes sense with the lore of landing on Genesis that it would cause something like this to happen, and it's not just some crazy, silly thing. Short Treks is based on Discovery. I've watched a few pieces of them, and they're just rude and crude and not treating each other as Starfleet officers. It's F tier. It's terrible. Go away, you nasty piece of crap. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I just realized what I did. So Star Trek Beyond, I apologize, is the third of those films. So Star Trek, the original of the rebooted stuff with Christopher Fiennes right here in C's tier. Star Trek Beyond, dang it. It's at least A tier. I'm not sure what to do with it because the thing was they actually showed stuff that was pre-change, which could very well have been in the original timeline of Star Trek, and they actually started feeling more like actual Star Trek characters because Simon Pegg got to write and I believe direct, at least do the direction, and it shows it's somebody that actually loves Star Trek and actually cares and wants to tell a story, and it's so much better. But unfortunately, it's already following these other two films, and it didn't do as well in theaters. But that's the reality. Good Star Trek's probably not going to do as well in theaters because it's actually more intelligent and not necessarily just fast paced with simple concepts in it. It's going to make you wrestle. That's why I appreciated the Orville so much, is because it made you wrestle and think through things like old Star Trek did. And it's like, man, we literally could have just said Orville is Star Trek and just it wouldn't have been hard because it actually fits so well. All right, what is this? 6, The Undiscovered Country. Everything I remember is really good, and I love it. And Klingons have pink blood. It's just been a while since I've watched some of these. It's good. It's really good. Yeah, good stuff there. Star Trek 4. Yeah, that's the whale movie. You know what? I think it's better than The Search for Spock in a way. I always think of it as cheesy, but yet it's because I watched it so much because it's so funny and it's so hilarious watching them in the current day of their era trying to go rescue whales. And it's so silly because of the probe that comes to Earth, but yet it's good, right? It's fantastic and it's fun. Good stuff. It is. And I love that Scotty interacting with the computer stuff back in the olden days and trying to talk to the mouse. Hello, computer. And it's just awesome. Transparent aluminum, right? Am I right? And space whales. But anyway, time travel messes everything up, and they probably did too. All right, so our next one is Star Trek Voyager. F tier. No. Love the concept here. I wish they would have gone farther, so I'm not going to put it quite in S tier. I love the show, and it was one of my favorites growing up, but then as I've grown up, I've started to realize I think it lacks. I don't know. Actually, I'm going to put it in S tier because I think it's a better concept there. TNG, I'm going to put in A tier, not because it's terrible. It's just the fact that there was a furthering. There's starting to be a thing, especially once Deep Space Nine really hit hardcore. And then Voyager kind of backtracked of telling bigger long-form stories. And I think that was so important. Because I think that's the one weakness of TNG is that sometimes they didn't tell long-form stories, which was good because then it was easier to get into it, but it also sometimes made it a weaker show at times. Anyway, And Voyager still liked to do that, but it also furthered its plot a little bit more at times. And you went, okay, things are moving on. And when you saw 7, you're like, okay, we're at this point in the show. Plus, oh, my bad, sorry. And I will say, let me make sure we're back to where we need to be. Good. Voyager just, I don't know. I always enjoyed Janeway. She was crazy. And then her future self coming back to break all of like time. Dang it! Star Trek: The Next Generation also has Time's Arrow with Data. Data episode just make everything S tier for them too. Dang it! Yep, that's true. Okay, we got the. You know, it's funny if you notice, where are all the TV series? They're up at S tier of the original shows, right? You see that, right? That there's a reason, because they were written well. And for those that say Star Trek Enterprise wasn't, granted, the first season and maybe even second season wasn't necessarily great, but then the I want to say Kazon, that's Voyager, the Xindi arc in the third season, and then the fourth season is just pure fan service in a good way, that it's trying to love on the fans and say, we want to answer questions like, why do the Klingons not have ridges in the original series? Why Data's lineage and some of the Khan Noonien Singh stuff, which leads us to our actually last thing. So anyway, Star Trek Enterprise season 4 is just fantastic, and I love seeing the Enterprise in season 3, where it's getting beat up like it's the Year of Hell, 2-parters from Voyager, but as a whole season, and it's beautiful. So good. So good. All right. Our last one, though. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Definitely D tier. Terrible. No, let's be honest. Ricardo Montalban. I think that's how you say it. Space Seed, was that the original series episode? Think so. Such a fun, interesting episode. Just seeing a superhuman that they rescue and think everything's fine, and no, he's going to go on a straight tear. And the only thing I could ever critique of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, is that they land on the wrong planet and don't know it, and also somehow they recognize each other. Chekhov and Khan, and Chekhov wasn't in the show yet when that episode came out. So it's just kind of a funny continuity error, and also that they didn't know there's a planet missing in the solar system, and so they land on the wrong planet. Like, sensors are there for a reason. But the submarine type space battle that happens is one of the coolest things from the original series stuff. So it's that good. I mean, it's oh man. I don't know. I'm struggling here. They're that good. Yeah, The Wrath of Khan is just so good. Sorry. Also, side note, the reason First Contact's so good is we get to see the first warp flight. Like, they actually traveled back in time and showed us the first warp flight, and then Star Trek Enterprise, the Mirror episode 2-parter, showed us that same thing kind of happen, a part of it, but instead of shaking hands, Zephyr Cochrane just pulls out a shotgun. And it's so funny, and like just blows the Vulcans away. You're like, what just happened? But yeah, I think this is where I'm at. Man. Oh, also, another reason Star Trek Discovery, and we don't even have on here Strange New Worlds for some reason. That's funny. It would be, Strange New Worlds wouldn't be as low as Discovery, and Picard, maybe C tier we could make a case for, maybe. But it still suffers from the same problems a lot of New Trek, that the story writing just isn't very strong. And Discovery, they really mess with Spock later on and make his half-sister, or whatever you want to call Michael Burnham. Is she adopted? I think she's adopted. So stepsister, or not a stepsister, adopted sister. Sorry. Just the one that helps teach him how to be Vulcan. It's just weird. It just makes you just not even want to care about Spock, which is ridiculous and crazy. And it's supposed to be set in the same universe as all of these older shows, but nothing about it and how the people act, the ships, the technology adds up at all. It just doesn't work. The only thing I could say that Star Trek Discovery had that was kind of interesting was the look of the original series Enterprise. clear it doesn't match up with Star Trek the original series or the movies, but yet it does look really cool. I will give it that. It looks way better than the reimagined Star Treks make the Enterprise look. I'll just say that. But yeah, Star Trek Beyond is actually, of those reimagined ones, the best, because it actually Simon Pegg just honored Star Trek. So yeah, these are my rankings. Do you agree or not? Let me know down in the comments below. I would love to have a conversation with you all in this, because these are totally subjective to each of us, right? That we care about Star Trek in different parts of it, and some of us may very well enjoy the original series, or the new reimagined with Chris Pine Star Trek. And when those came out, like, I enjoyed them, but the more you think about them, and especially Into Darkness at the end, yeah, whenever they defeat Khan and then they use his super blood, that it's apparently a resurrection device. that means you're gonna hook Khan up and clone him or harvest his blood, and nobody in the Federation's ever dying again. Got it? Got it. Good. It's that simple. Anyway, I will say, I think, last little thought before I go, the reimagined Star Treks, the actor who plays Bones, Dr. McCoy, is fantastic. He's in several other things, like he's the Scourge in Thor, not the Dark World. What was that? The third one. Is that Thor Ragnarok? And he's been several other characters, and I cannot remember his name right now. Let me know down in the comments below, because it's slipping my mind. But yeah, these are my ratings for Star Trek series and movies. And yeah, if Strange New Worlds was on here, I put it in D or C tier. I'd probably C tier. I've enjoyed it more because there was actually some episodes in there that actually felt more Star Trek, and they were actually almost behaving like old school Star Trek. Almost. It was decent. Well, I've been Cody from the Keepers of Nerddom. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of Star Trek? Where would you rate these? Take care. Bye, y'all.